welcome to my journal flip through for my Journalling Krazy Island Style 2015 journal. And you can see I've got this in a beautiful leather bound journal, and I've got a lovely kind of fibery spine, covered spine with some beads and charms and things as well. But essentially it's a beautiful leather journal. Now, the thing that I love about this is that that it will last and last and last. Now, my journal binding video is going to be available as a standalone lesson in 2016 in January. So if you like the look of this journal and want to know how to bind your loose leaf journal pages in a really funky kind of style that's very, very secure and strong, this is the way to do it. Alright, so into the thing. So what I decided to do was to use some of my fabric paper as the outer first page, because we always lose that kind of first page when we're doing journals. So I have a few extra ring-in pages, not just Journaling Krazy Island Style pages here. This one was to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the Krazy Island family, and we did 3 little lessons, Gina, Claudia and I, as the senior admins of that group, and Journaling Krazy Island Style, and we actually put together a little mini course, free lessons, which you can go to Krazy Island University and you can take now to see what we did. This was the numbers prompt, and so I love numbers, and I had been hoarding this massive number 7 that I'd gotten out of a magazine for a really long time. I also used a little bit of Tim Holtz tissue paper here because I loved this bank of numbers down the side, and I decided to just keep putting some numbers that I had gotten from magazines, and then I thought 7 things I love about my life. So I just wrote the 7 things that I really loved about my life on this page and just collaged it all down, used some oranges, used some inks, just had a lot of fun with this page, loved it. This was about inner goddess. I decided, because I didn't want to do an inner goddess, I decided to interpret this with a goddess of the sea, and I just used as my inspiration fins and, you know, like webbed fins and things like that, and the beautiful colours of the sea, and I absolutely loved that. This was the animal prompt, and I loved that. I've been doing some whimsy animals with Lifebook, and a lot of them I just came up with my own little lion. I thought he was so cute, and used some collage to do the tree and the balloons, and I love that page, and I love the quote, "Animals are such agreeable friends, they ask no questions and they pass no criticisms," and that's so true. It's one of the things that people love about animals, and dogs in particular. This was the black and white prompt, and I decided to do a drippy page, but then I got a yen to do some Zen doodle circles and a few Zen doodles at the bottom. I just like this page. I started it off with some drips and ended it off with very clean, sleek lines. This was the Australia page, and this prompt, I tell you what, did some of my students in, because I taught them how to draw some of these animals, and that was part of the exercise, and then I taught them how to draw the map, to shade it, and to put the whole thing together, and a lot of my students really took their time learning that. It was a really involved lesson, but I loved what they did with it. This lesson here, the Tree of Life, was probably my most popular lesson of the year. I have actually sold some prints of this page that are going out shortly, and it will be part of my big bundle of 6 and is a standalone lesson as well on Krazy Island University, but I loved it and had a great time doing it. This lesson here was called Negative Space, and what I really wanted to do was show in very big detail that you could paint a picture underneath, but you could then show that picture showing through in the negative space of the buildings that we put here. And I did almost kind of an optical illusion because the edges are here, but they kind of almost look like the stumps of trees in between the buildings, and that's kind of the look that I was going for in this whole page. It was a really interesting lesson to come up with and teach, and I really liked it. This is a ring-in page, and this was just my first ever portrait of a girl using Claudia Rossi's faces, how to paint a face. And I used her techniques, which are often mathematical, to do the face, and it was very good to start with. It's a great course to actually just start off with, and I really enjoyed it. She's been sitting on my mood board for a few years, and I have no background for her because I used that clean background to do digital collages with her in the front, and that worked very well. This is actually a lesson from Lifebook this year from Joanne Sharp, and I loved it. She talked about using watercolors and working on your letters and making them work within your borders. I love the way that this particular page turned out. I did it on beautiful watercolor paper, and because I have a number of loose pages in addition to my jkis pages every year, last year I had a lot of DLP pages, this year I didn't have time for DLP, I tend to include them in this loose journal. And I love this. I did a couple of these and I gave them away. This was an inspiration stick challenge. It was a challenge in January, so one of my first pages I did for this year with Gina, Claudia and Aaron Blazevich from Imperfect Impulses, and this was my take on the inspiration stick challenge. Quite a lot of people really quite liked that page. I liked it. I liked how the circles in the middle look a little bit airbrushed. So this was the Floral Fantasy page, and so I took license on this. This is what I mean about sometimes it's good to use your scans, because this was out of my sketchbook, and this was a pencil drawing that I did based on some work with Jane Davenport's, but she is my own, and I've put my spin on her. The whole thing that I wanted to start with this page was doing the open lips and having a little bit of a different shape with the lips there, but I did the whole thing. I think I painted it in about 30 minutes with watercolor, and all I've done is just add just the tiny little a bit of pencil here, but essentially I've just done watercolor for this whole page, and I love that girl. She's one of my favorite girls that I've ever done, and I've said flowers always make people better, happier and more helpful. They are sunshine, food and medicine for the soul, by Luther Burbank, and I love that. This is my turtle page. I've had a lot of feedback on this particular page. This is a beautiful page. I actually started with the turtle, which was from the Spectrum Noir DVD. They had some PDFs of things, and this is their turtle, and you might recognize it from the Spectrum Noir tin. But what I actually wanted to do was to play around with the turtle with alcohol markers or water-based markers, and then layer my pencils on the top, and this is what I did with that. And I actually have a tutorial on this page on YouTube. It starts from after I've applied the markers and in with the pencil, but the markers are pretty easy to do. And then I used glazes for the background because I wanted that layered look, and I had that kind of dark look from the bottom going up to the light rippling through the top, and I like to try to be like the turtle, at ease in your own shell. And that was done in January because I got a whole heap of pencils for Christmas, so this was one of the first pages that I used all my pencils on. This is the blues prompt. Now the blues prompt, sometimes we all get the blues, was all about working with some feelings and some depression. And then what I worked with in this particular lesson was just doing an abstract painting over the top. Something that was quick and something that you could think about conceivably doing in a feelings journal. Essentially, this particular page took me less than half an hour to do, and when you're working in feelings journals, that's something that you might want to do, where you can sit down and write your thoughts and do something either over the top or incorporating that so that you can work through some feelings that you're going through at the time. This particular page here was the charcoal page, and I only used charcoal, used it on a piece of paper that had some yellow paint in the background, but essentially I just used charcoal. And I wanted to show how you could do work charcoal, and you could work it with water but then work it with your finger and use different types of pencils. So I've used some willow and different types of soft, medium, hard pencils in this particular charcoal, and then I've used a fixative over the top to stop the charcoal from moving. This is another ring-in page. I decided that I would use some of my jelly prints and some of my son's drawings to actually incorporate some of my son's drawings into my journal this year. And I did this kind of at the last minute because I found a whole heap of his sketches one day, and he said, "Mum, what do you want to do with these?" And so I decided that I would put some of these into my journal. This was the colour pink. So this was my exploration of the colour pink, and it was a watercolour again, and I just wanted to do a really nice kind of simple background with an explosion of they're not roses, they're like camellias, and an abstract kind of leaves around the edges, and I really like it. And I like also incorporating writing onto my pages as well. This is for Mother's Day, and this is based on a photo of my mother when she was young and she had a horse called Shadow. I just kind of traced this photo, made it what I wanted, painted the background, and then did a rough sketch and trace of the horse and my mum on the front. And I said, "My mother at 15 was Shadow, I love you, Mum," and that was my Mother's Day prompt, which I loved. This was my side profile face prompt, and so this is where I showed, and I did this on grid paper because I wanted people to be able to do their measurements with the face. So this is a girl that has a very kind of elongated head, but I really wanted to show the difference that you could do with this particular type of prompt, doing that side profile. I draw them a little bit differently now, but I do have a particular system that you can do that. And I think it just guesses, like, I think you just sometimes want to draw different shapes. There are some people that have very long heads, and there are some people that have shorter heads and skulls, and I just wanted to accentuate that with a long bun. And I also, again, was showing you how to put some lovely lettering with layering your letters on top of this down the side and incorporating that into your page. Another one of my favourite lessons. So this was all about wings. And I decided that I would do a back portrait because, of course, you see the wings from the back. And the main part of this lesson was actually using alcohol markers to create these beautiful translucent wings on tracing paper or deli paper, and then you have this kind of translucency on the back, and I incorporated that over the top and painted her rope over the top and gave her wings. And the way that I did the shading on this, I just absolutely love. I kind of just, it's one of those things where you have to take the lesson, and people loved that lesson. It was very, very pretty and just very girly, and I really liked it. This was the love page, so this was based around February, and I did a masking over technique of a background with some hearts, and then again I was trying another side profile. This particular side profile, I just changed her eye a little bit and decided that I would correct that eye because I had the eye almost like a fish facing forward, and it was one of those ones where we all have these fails, and sometimes those fails, they get to me, and so I just did and did a little bit different. So this is about my happy place, and so I just got into the space of using thick gesso, and I used the Art Ears stencil, but I had a beautiful kind of sprayed and stamped background, and I used some of the elements that I've picked up at some vintage markets, which I really loved, and I just really wanted this to be kind of a deeper kind of thing so that the white words really stood out, and I really just loved some of those elements. That's an unfinished page that was kind of on the end of my mother's page. You can see a little bit of that paint, and I've put a jelly print on there just to as a background, but I'm still thinking about what I'm going to do, but I'm actually going to work on that page as is. This was a page that I did upside down, and I kind of loved it. I was working on, I'm trying to remember what the prompt was. I did it in April, and I bubbled gesso. So I used a gesso technique where I put some gesso on, and then I heated it up with a heat gun and made it till it bubbled, and then left it to dry. It gives you some awesome texture. And I really was also exploring the concept of complementary colours, and I left, I had the orange background, and then I did the white gesso over the top, and then that allowed me to put like an ocean blue with some gold, and I then did some spraying in the background as well, and then I said some days I feel like my world is upside down. Again, playing with feelings and emotions. This is actually a page from last year that I had put somewhere and could not find for the life of me. Could not find the page, and it was the fabric page from last year. And I've got some tags in that page, some tags that Gina sent me that I loved, and used some elements there. And I just used some sewing and some fabric, and I just love that page. It worked really well, and I used some of my trimmings from my lamps and some of Gina's doodles, and I painted some of the background with some of my lamp fabric that I did when I covered a couple of lampshades last year. So I found that page and just incorporated it into this journal. Love this page. This was the most awesome transfer that I had been sitting on for a while, and I was exploring about thoughts. So this was a prompt this year about thoughts, and about what are we thinking today. And I said, what if everyone could see all the thoughts in my head? What kind of pictures would they see? And I just thought this whole page, that was exactly, it was just perfect for this prompt, because that was exactly what I could see, all these things coming out of this person's head. This was the observations page, and I went in kind of a Fabonichi kind of style, journaling your day with different things that you did in your day. And I can recommend a site called The Little Ink, which is from one of my friends on the Canson Australia design team. The Little Ink, she does this quite a lot and has a good little following. Her name is Courtney Diaz, and she does a lot of work that way, and I kind of a little bit based it on stuff that she did. This page is upside down, but this is Practice Makes Perfect. And because I was working in signatures this year, I made 1 or 2 mistakes, and so this is the one that I couldn't fix, and so I just left, because it would be easy to turn the journal around and just have a look at the page. So this was just where I was just having a look at little portraits, and I used paint chips. So I had a whole bunch of paint chips, and I just drew on top of those and then stuck them on in a grid. Really quite liked it, and just was playing with facial features in different kind of poses and different looking up, looking down, doing all sorts of things. So I really kind of liked that. Practice makes perfect. This was Birdsong, and I think this is one of my favourite pages for the year. It's a collage page, and I used some old sheet music, some old stamps, things that people have sent me, some muslin that I had painted and dyed, and this awesome picture from a magazine of a bird sitting on top of a really 70s vintage alarm clock that I just loved, some tickets that people had sent me, little postcards, and some note paper and some stamps, and I just think it's one of my good assemblage pages. And I don't often do a lot of collage, but when I do, I love it. And I love this page. I love the warmth of this page. And I also had like a watercolour stump in there where I was playing with watercolours. So it's very much an elements page of just things that were out of Happy Mail and out of my collage bin. And for me, just works. Just loved it. This was the prompt called Abstraction. And this was where we were working in abstract. This was Claudie's prompt, but I loved the painting that I did. And I actually want to do a canvas based on this. And this is exactly an example of where you can work with in your journals and then get inspired to do something on a bigger scale. I really like it. Is it a sunrise or a sunset? You tell me. This was Creepy. And this was the body parts prompt. So I literally went into putting human heads on with animal or fish body parts. I had some awesome collage elements that I used from the Womankind magazine and from a book that I have on moths and butterflies, and I just loved it. I loved the darkness of it. I loved the fact that it does kind of look creepy. And again, you've got the fish on with the eye on the side. This was the no brushes prompt. So the no brushes prompt was you couldn't use a brush at all. So I used catalyst tools. So I had different catalyst tools for this prompt, and I also used some Montmartre paint and sculpt tools. So these are the tools that I used for this prompt, and my fingers. But my husband fell in love with this particular cityscape so much that he actually wants me to paint a large scale canvas to put on the wall, and I am seriously thinking about it. This was my face for the Le Visage course. So the mini course within JKIS this year took you over the course of a month on how to draw a face, how to shade your face, and then how to do the hair and the background. I did a few different techniques within this, but I essentially worked within watercolour and showed you how to use watercolour to shade your faces and to draw your faces. And I can tell you it looked really, really different from the time that I started to the time that I went. I used my my Inktense hair technique. The hair's a bit large and that, but I kind of like it. It's one of those things where you do stuff and then you think, would I do that again? I don't know. I liked her though and left her in there. This is the good and evil prompt, and I had seen the artist, I'm trying to remember his name, it'll come to me, but this is actually a sketch from the artist Dibley or Darley, I don't know, where I did it on bleed proof paper. And I had Two-Face because I wanted the good and the evil. I loved his drawing so much. I used alcohol markers for this and then painted around the outside, and I just loved the contrast on the bleed proof paper, and then I collaged it onto the page because I used a different type of bleed proof paper. Is very quite thin paper, but it doesn't make your markers bleed through the outer edges. This was for Father's Day, and this is, my dad loves flathead, and they're a type of fish, and he's what we call a flathead fishing specialist, and that's what he loves. Now, I decided that I would do my watercolours and paint a flathead, so I drew a picture of a flathead that my dad would love, and then I worked to model the paints. Now, that was quite an in-depth page for watercolour technique, and it's probably something that I should do an actual class on for the techniques for that lesson. Not that everybody wants to paint a watercolour flathead, but to get the depth of colour in the skin and to make it actually look like a flathead, that was quite a feat to do. My fairies in the garden prompt. Now, this prompt, I taught you how to incorporate a napkin that looked like you'd painted it. So this doesn't look here like I've used a napkin at all, because I've incorporated the background and worked that into. I then also decided to show you how to do paint over collage, and I showed you how to manipulate your figures to make them the right size to pop them into this place. I then showed you how to paint over the face, and then what to do with the hair and the wings, and again to use some lettering on your page to make the whole thing work. It's one of my favourite double spreads for the year. I did a few double spreads for the year, and this one works particularly well. This one here is all about thoughts. I had this awesome whole page on weird street art, and it's what's holding you back. So things that hold you back, what are the, like chains. So these are the chains. This is the chains prompt. Sometimes I interpret the prompts really differently. I saw this, and then I just scraped a little bit of gesso or white paint over the top, because I wanted to write there, and I decided that this looked really good with graffiti, because this was street art and it kind of reminded me of graffiti art. So I did some of the graffiti with different paint pens, and then I was pretty much done. And again, it's another great kind of example of what you can do in a feelings or emotions journal. This was my Learn Your Letters prompt, and I showed you how to do a modern day illuminated panel with an illuminated letter, and we did some work on some letters, but have a look at how good that looks. I love it. These are the sorts of panels that you can then print, sell prints of, put on your wall, have, you know, if you're practicing lettering, it's a really good way. That was a really good lesson. It's also in my bundle of 6. So it's a really fun lesson. This was Under the Sea. I did something a little bit different for here. I just kind of drew in Escape, and then I worked with Inktense blocks. The main thing I wanted to do was do this poem that I'd found, and I wanted really bright colours. I was just experimenting with colour, and it's kind of not the normal page that I would normally do, but I kind of liked it, and I sealed it with matte medium so that it wouldn't impact on any pages if it was still a little bit chalky after I'd activated. So what I said was, the shattered water made a misty din. Great waves looked over others coming in and thought of doing something to the shore. That water never did to the land before. The clouds were low and hairy in the skies, like locks blown forward in the gleam of eyes. You could not tell, and yet it looked as if the shore was lucky in being backed by a cliff. And I just loved that. It was very lyrical, and I just did something around having some sand to do that with, but it's on the sand on the sea floor. So it's different again. So you're thinking about the shore, you can't actually see the shore. This was my last page for the year, and so we see where pages go. I don't put them in chronological order. This was a great page. I had a bunch of jelly prints that I'd done almost 12 months ago. They had were really quite pretty, and I didn't know what to do with them. But I had an idea for this, that I would use a gloss. Can you see that this is glossy? I would use gloss gel medium through over the top of a mask, and I would then have left the background for the trees, and I could then shade the trees. I love this technique. I've used it in the reverse on some paintings that I've done, but I used it again here to really focus on those trees, and then I just use a Sharpie marker to write over the top. I love that page. Very simple. This was my mission inspiration with Mike Deacon, so it was a challenge that we issued each other, and it was basically using a set of inspiration stick prompts, and this was my take on that. That's on my YouTube channel if you want to go and see it. It's quite hilarious. We did it based on Mission Impossible, and it was all cloak and dagger stuff. This is the prompt of what lies beneath. So I basically sketched out my words and my flowers and the stems in masking fluid. I had this awesome background that I did with neons that I just completely adored, and then I painted the whole thing over with black paint, and then I had to rub it all off. So it was very interesting. So this was part of October Creepy Month, but this is another way you can interpret. If you didn't want to do something that was creepy, you could interpret it in a completely different way, and I really liked it. And I showed you how to use that masking technique to full advantage here. This was my Creepy Curiosities prompt, and I really wanted to base it on Alice in Wonderland, and I gathered a few of my free printable images that I keep as art reference guides, and I collaged the whole lot together underneath this page and found a couple of elements that really worked for me. And then I showed you how to really work those elements with your markers, with your pencils, and to create a really depth in this particular scene. I did a watercolor background where I used inks, and I allowed the matte medium that I had scraped on to collage things down, and it really impacted the way and the texture of these pages. And this was such a fun page, and I went with the quotes. Sometimes I believe in as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast, which I thought was very much a part of this page. This was things that go bump in the night. So I just thought, the thought of things going bump in the night, that was all about eyes. And actually Claudia and I did eyes, but I did coloured eyes, and I did a whole bunch of eyes. And I just had, like a cartoon, at first cock crow, the ghosts must go back to their quiet graves below. It's creepy. This was my nature-inspired prompt, and again, it's one of those really, really quick pages where I did a bonus page that's on my YouTube channel. And this was my teaser for jkis 2016. This was a really, really fun technique where I essentially scraped paint over the page, scraped some more paint, wrote on it, and that's what you got. And I really think that you can make something beautiful out of interesting techniques. And this was all about just using a card, and there's no real brushes involved in that at all. So that could have been a no brushes allowed page as well. This was my final lesson for the year, and this is for the prompt, a penny for your thoughts. So I basically put down a whole bunch of my thoughts, and I walked you through an exercise to think about that which has happened this year, the good and the bad, write it all down. Then draw your calla lilies, and then I took you through an exercise to not actually do your calla lilies just in white, to actually do them in different colours, but to limit yourself for the whole page to 3 colours except for the yellow. So I limited myself to the 3 colours, which was the phthalo turquoise, the white and the purple, and how they work together to actually go and create the page. And then I put on there, my thoughts are worth more than a penny, because they are. This was such a fun prompt. This was one of those prompts where it was a prompt where I just felt the need. I'm trying to remember what the actual prompt was because I haven't written it on there. Don't we just love that? I should go back to my prompt book and find out what one that was because it was really cool. That's the pay it forward prompt. That was my prompt. I did a lesson on this. Pay it forward. So I did a bunch of postcards which I randomly sent out, and somebody contacted me yesterday and told me that they'd gotten one. This was the pay it forward, and I wanted to use something interesting. I wanted to use some elements from my Happy Mail, some things that people had paid forward blessings to me. So this page was inspired by things that people had sent to me, so like this fabric here, this postcard, these papers, some stamps. I just loved it. Some of the vintage papers. And I decided that I would do this on wallpaper. So this is the paper I used for this was actually wallpaper, and that gave this awesome background and texture that I didn't have to work with, and it was perfect for collage. It really worked really, really well. Here's another one of those pages with my son Dominic's one of his drawings, and I just did a graffiti kind of background that was kind of crunchy and just tried to incorporate that in the page because it was all kind of encompassing, and I absolutely loved this. Again, this was one of my earlier pages in the year, and I have done some scans of this, and I do have prints of this available. This was again using this time water-based markers for some peacocks that I drew, and then using pencils over the top. And I just love the depth of colour that you get with these beautiful peacocks. So I've used your markers, and you can see where I've used the markers here. Out of this whole thing, this area here took the most work, and you can see with the detail for those beautiful scalloped feathers. But I love the texture that you get here in the light and shade. It looks like they're actually fluffy and with feathers, and that technique works really, really quite well. I worked on that when I was on hiatus for a weekend at my friend Vicky's house. This is a page I did for a friend, and I've just added a couple of my friend Kellyanne's butterflies in when I was binding this and putting the pages together. This is just one of those Prima stencils, but all I use the Prima stencil for essentially is just to do a really kind of light sketch, and then I'll go over the top. I did this for a girl who was doing a journal for one of her friends that had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and they were doing a book of memories to give to this particular lady. She's a mum of 3 girls, and I did this for her, whipped it up really quickly and gave it to her so that she could write her thoughts. When I went back to this page, I remembered that, and I just wrote in something that was resonating with me at the time, and it was, she decided she would see the world with joy each day, which was really simple. And again, something you could use in a feelings journal. This is exactly something that I did for an emotions journal. This is an exercise that I did in my art therapy course. Absolutely loved it. And using 3 colours only, we had to pick those 3 colours and then explore the emotions we were feeling while we were painting it. I chose not to use brushes, and this whole thing is finger painted. This was something that they asked us to do as well, and I just interplayed those until I was very happy with that. This again is another exercise that I did for my art therapy diploma. And my colour theory. So this was one of the exercises I did for colour theory, and we had to collage something in a colour that resonated with us, and I did it in reds and oranges because for me those are more my colours on that colour spectrum. And that was an interesting exercise, doing that with lots of little pieces. I don't generally do collage like that, but I put it in there because it's part of my journey for this year. This was a Lifebook page that I did. It was all about seeing yourself and your possibilities and the seeds here. I really enjoyed that particular lesson, and I did it over the top of some collaged work that I had. And this was about, I worked over some collage. I had definitely a whole bunch of papers that I wanted to work here, and I started in acrylic. Actually, I started in watercolor and acrylic, and I used some translucent paints here, and in the end some pencil to just define finally the face. I really liked that lesson for what it gave me. I did it very differently from the lesson that was taught, and I had some writings in there underneath. I liked it so much that when I was asked to do a scenescape of myself for something that I'm wanting, a goal in my life, and seeing myself there, I did a really big version of this, and it will go on an inspiration board for me for next year. One of the last prompts of the year, and this was funky papers. So I used some of my fabric paper. I used wallpaper as the basis for the page, and I was doing, I had just after my birthday had received a gift voucher from my great friend Gina, and I used part of that to buy Susie Blue's book on girls in mixed media, and I adapted whatever style she was doing there to do my own girl, and I just loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. So I drew the girl on a separate bit of paper and collaged it on here, because you can't really draw on the wallpaper, it's too textured, but I really wanted to show the texture of the wallpaper here. So I just did, like, I scraped over and then used a little bit of a brush to use again some of those beautiful translucent chocolatey earthy tones with some Naples yellow and a little bit of white, and I just left it at that. Then I went through, I have little alphabet from A to Z, so for everything that you use with your die cutting machine, I've got a couple of alpha dies, and I keep that which I don't use, so I tend to use like a whole lot at a time, or part of an alphabet at a time, and I put them from A to Z. And then I went through and I found a whole bunch of stuff, and I had just finished working with Mike on this, where's that blue page? I just finished working with Mike on the inspiration stick page and the mission inspiration page, and had a ball of a time doing that. And I just thought to myself, oh gosh, so I just finished working on that page, and then I did this page, and it was like, oh, I love British accents, because he'd done this intro for my video for that, and that I just couldn't stop. I couldn't stop thinking about it, so I just wrote it down, because I think sometimes it's good to be funny and frivolous, and that's kind of what that page was all about for me. This was the checkers prompt, and what I wanted to do was to have a background of checkers that I used a stencil for with those squares, and then I wanted to do sort of kaleidoscopic checkers, and I ended up choosing to do a face in between, but you kind of lose her, but you kind of see her. And I did a little bit of spray over as well, just because I wanted to grunge it up. Really quite like that page. I think it's quite interesting with the different way that the checkers work on the page. This is my whimsy prompt, and it often gets a little bit from this one here, which means that I either just rub out a little bit of the things here, because I've worked over inks, watered down inks, and use them as watercolors, which means they're permanent and you can't rub them off, which is great. But what I'm also thinking of doing is putting over some sort of coating over this page so that it doesn't affect this page, because they're very, very different. So this is my whimsy prompt. I taught this prompt. It was a really, really fun lesson. You've seen a couple of girls on possibly seen a couple of girls on Facebook showing what they did as interpretation for that lesson. I said to you that when I was looking at possibly doing children's book illustration, this was the little girl as the central character that came up with my mind, and the little cat as well, because I love cats. And I used for inspiration a Mash It Up journal page that I'd done when I was in a plane 10,000 feet above the air, and I only had limited supplies, and again very limited supplies here, but an expansion on that lesson, and it was absolutely loved. This was an inspiration stick challenge that I did at the end of last year when the inspiration sticks were first done by Claudia. It was just Gina, Claudia and I don't really like the page, but I really think it's important to put it in your pages that you don't necessarily like, because they show the journey of where you go. And for me, this page just didn't work for me in the end, and I think sometimes you have pages like that and it's good. This is another Lifebook page. This is pretty recent. I call her Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Why? Because I've used Lumiere paint in her hair, and I've got these beautiful stickles coming off the edge of her hair there as if she's sparkling. This was based on Tam's free lesson Lunar in the Sky. My girl is very, very different, and I like the way I've done her eyes, particularly for this. And I like, I did this on canvas paper. Now this is quite different to use than watercolour paper or mixed media paper. It has a cross-stitch canvas woven texture, and it was very different to work on, and I loved it for this kind of work. And it makes me think that if I'm going to do some more Lifebook work with Tam's work, and I often work loose leaf, that I'll be working on some canvas paper, because I have a nice big, this is out of a paper pad that I've got, and I've got a lot of it, and I like having a look at some of the inspiration that she's got there. This was another inspiration stick challenge in January 2015 with Gina, Claudia and Aaron again. So we had a lot of fun with this, a lot of fun. I've just had someone go back and have a look at this page, and they really, really enjoyed it. This was an inspiration stick page that worked a hell of a lot better than the last one that I showed you, and I really like it. I like the colours in it, and I thought about my composition a lot more on this page than I had in previous pages, and that was really fun. You can see the video for that on this channel. This was the arrows prompt, and I again had this awesome page with just this picture. It was black, and it was just this mouth with Australia right in the middle of it, and I loved it, and I thought about where am I going to use it. So I pulled out some arrows dies that I had and cut up a couple of those with on some jelly printed papers that I had, stuck them on, and it said, all roads lead to home, every arrow points me in the direction where my heart is, there is no place like home. And I like how you can marry all those elements in with a few simple things on the page. And my last page, and one of my favourite pages for the year, was the mermaid prompt. And I actually filmed a mini lesson for this. It's a bonus lesson. It's something I'm going to release on my YouTube channel soon. It was just a speed up of me actually painting this page, which I'd forgotten that I actually filmed. But there's a lot of fun with this, and it was released as a bonus with jkis for that particular prompt. But everything in that prompt was just done so, so well. And this is the end. Yay! You can see the fabric paper, and the fabric paper worked so well. It's nice, such a strong and bendy material to use in this sort of thing, and although it's puffy in some places, it just works particularly well. And because it's matte, it doesn't stick to any of the pages, so I don't have it sticking to pages. And that, my lovelies, is my JKIS journal, or Peter's journal, for all my loose leaf for 2015. And I can say that I think of all the techniques where I've used for binding journals, this is probably my favourite. And like I said, that course will be available in January. Enjoy!